Great. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you all could be here today. We have people coming in from Belarus and Israel and Ukraine and all across the country. This is great. What an amazing woman Judy Patkin is. And this event will highlight just the tip of the iceberg of the many projects, programs, and community action efforts Judy initiated. So hard to fit 45 years of history into an hour. Before we get going with the program, I just want to share a few logistics with you that will hopefully make your viewing experience great. The first thing is we wanted to use Zoom rather than the webinar style presentation, even though there's so many people logging in today, so that we could see each other and interact as much as possible. The event is being recorded so that people who couldn't come can view it after the fact. Please use your speaker view instead of gallery view for the best viewing experience. You will be muted throughout the event until the very, very end when we have time for some more interaction. Please do open your chat box though, and feel free to scroll through and see everybody's faces. It's so nice to see everybody's faces, but please do open your chat box and use it freely to comment on the videos, share stories and memories, and just to say hello to dear friends. In a moment, we're going to welcome Judy in, and we want to do it in an incredibly special way, and I need your help with this. So please think of a word or two to describe Judy. Write it in the chat box, but don't press enter, don't send it yet. When you see, we're gonna have a special countdown like New Year's Eve, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you'll see a welcome Judy sign. When you see the welcome Judy sign, then we wanna all press enter at the same time. And we will have a sort of waterfall of all of these beautiful words to welcome Judy into the event with. So if you are all ready, we'll get going and let's welcome Judy. Press enter. Hi, Judy. All right. Judy, take a look at these wonderful words of welcome that people are putting into the chat to welcome you in. And now it's my honor and delight to introduce you all to our MC for the event. Rabbi Moshe Waldox, or as he is affectionately called, Reb Moshe, is the founding rabbi of Temple Beth Zion, TBZ, an independent congregation in Brookline, Mass. He's been associated with Action for Soviet Jewry from its inception and traveled to Russia on a mission in 1985. He's also the co-editor of the Big Book of Jewish Humor, and that has been in print for close to 40 years. He's also emceed, I think, almost every single one of Action's big events over the years. He will be your guide as we journey through Judy's 45 years in action, at Action for Soviet and post-Soviet Jewry. Welcome, Reb Moshe.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to see all of you. Now, if you don't have your picture up and you just have your name up, don't be afraid. We want to see faces. I'm seeing so many faces of people that I have not seen in such a long time. Some people even have new faces. They've worked on themselves. But so, I tell you, it's really wonderful to be here. And I'm here because of nepotism. What can I say? I have to admit it. A disclaimer. My wife, Ann, and Judy share the same aunt. Look at that. So we're part of the larger mishpucha, and it's wonderful to be here. As Debbie said, we have people all over the world who are tuning in, and it doesn't substitute for the warm hugs that we would love to give Judy and for all of her many, many successes. But first of all, just a little bit about the whole movement. I mentioned earlier in a conversation, there were very few times in post-war Jewish life where most Jews could agree about something. It's amazing. It's hard to believe. And somehow the Soviet Jewry movement gave us that thing to hold on to. No matter where we were on the spectrum of Jewish life, we had this wonderful cause and we were successful. And I want to give special thanks to the Boston community, which I think did a tremendously wonderful job, and particularly because Judy was here and the sending of people to the Soviet Union, and then having this brilliant idea that guess what? There's still help to be given, even though the walls have come down. There's still stuff to do. And we'll be hearing all about the genesis of these wonderful movements here. I remember as a teenager being involved in the student struggle for Soviet Jewry, one of the early movements, Jacob Birnbaum, Oliver Shalom, and Glenn Richter in New York. And we created a model that ultimately was the model that the mainstream Jewish community adopted, which was basically to be out there with our cause, building coalitions, building partnerships, and we'll see how those partnerships ultimately paid off. So we're really, really thrilled that we can see all of your beautiful faces. And I'd like to, for our first segment, we'll be getting some pre-recorded segments in our program this morning or late afternoon, wherever you are. And the first one is going to talk about that in the beginning, there was Judy. And we'll have this wonderful, wonderful segment on the genesis of action for Soviet Jewry. Okay, go for it.
In the early 70s, I joined the Soviet Jewry Committee of the Jewish Community Council. I found Judy Patkin was already there. Jews were starting to speak up in public in Russia, and it was clear that many wanted to identify as Jews. A small group of us, including Judy, decided to bring new life to that committee. We wanted to be more active, so we formed Action for Soviet Jewry, and we affiliated with the Independent Union of Councils for Soviet Jews.
My name is Maury Shapira, and I'm joining this celebration to honor Judy from Sunnyvale, California. I'm the luckiest man in the world. I had the opportunity to work with the most noble, selfless individuals in the world in helping Soviet Jewry. I first met Judy probably in the 1971-72 timeframe at a JCRC Soviet Jewry Committee meeting. We had asked the leaders of the JCRC to lead, follow, or get out of the way in helping Soviet Jews. And when they didn't, we created Action for Soviet Jewry. We had a cadre of wonderful people working with us. People like Judy, Bob Gordon, Bailey Barron, Linda Glass, Dr. Alan Delman, Dr. Paul Applebaum, Zale Annis, just to name a few of the great people in the Boston Action for Soviet Jewry. If you think about all the evil dictators whom Judy helped to defeat, Brezhnev, Kosygin, Chernenko, Andropov, where are they today? They're in the dustbin of history. They're forgotten. Those Soviet robots couldn't defeat a Jewish woman of valor. Judy Patkin is a woman of valor, and I mean it in the sincerest tradition of Judaism. Her name was on the tongues of thousands of Jews in and out of the USSR. Two important words signified what was going on. When people would leave the apartments of Jews in the USSR, the last parting words were often, "Nicht vergessen." Please don't forget us. Judy never forgot them. She helped those who wanted to get out, leave in the largest peaceful migration in history. And she never forgot those who wished to live out the rest of their lives in the country where they were born.
Judy and Bailey Barron became co-chairs of Action. They started visiting refuseniks, those denied exit visas by the Soviets, and then briefing travelers on what to do and whom to see when they went in turn. They organized phone calls to refuseniks, sent literature, sent money, even electronic equipment, and they publicized information about refuseniks and prisoners to the other consuls in the US. Doris was one of the travelers.
When I first met Bob, he would take me to Soviet Jewry meetings. In 1988, we went to Russia to visit refuseniks. Judy briefed me on how to behave, what to do and not to do. She asked me whether I would bring a coat to a well-known refusenik. I said yes. Then she told me that I couldn't carry it in the street, that I had to wear it over my own coat. Here is a picture of me wearing the coat. She explained that any conversation about our visits had to be written on an Etch-a-Sketch. Any pieces of paper with addresses had to flush down the toilet. The trip turned out well with only one interview with the KGB. Thank you, Judy.
I traced the thread of what I do today directly back to walking into Crescent Street and being in that hive of activity with Gideon and Sheila, and of course, the presence of Judy Patkin everywhere and in everything. She was a presence. She was someone who was on a mission and kept everyone on that mission. I can give you a sense of the atmosphere that Judy created, of focus, of follow through, of excellence. Less than a year later, I was on a plane to Moscow, to go to Leningrad, to meet families, to find out how they were doing, to take inventories of their needs, to organize whatever needed to be done. And it was Judy's mission. It was Action's mission. And it was a thrill of a lifetime. It was a privilege of a lifetime that would not have happened if it weren't for Judy backing up families to say, get involved, get hands-on.
Thank you so much. The story is can't be told in a very short video because it went on for so many years and so many different people were affected by it. Now, in 1978, as I was in Boston for a number of years and got involved, a CNN called one-year-old Jessica Katz the littlest refusenik. And that was a name that stuck with her. And her story became, if you will, almost a test case for the Soviet Union. Looking back at some of the material from that time, I saw that Jessica's illness, which was at times rather critical, was, as the official account of the event said, Jessica's illness embarrassed the Soviets and highlighted that they were preventing the immigration of one who held no state secrets. As you know, that was often an excuse given why people were not granted visas, because they were somehow going to be a threat to Soviet national security. But here was a person who was a perfectly legitimate reason to leave the country, and the arbitrariness of Soviet refusals was successfully exposed. I remember when the arrival of Boris, Natasha, and the baby Jessica and sister Gabrielle in Boston was a celebration and a glimmer of the hope for the future. And what I think is very important to understand, it began this idea that we can't do this alone as Jews in the Jewish community, that we need to get out of our own Jewish community and develop the coalitions and the partnerships, particularly with people in powerful positions. So I'm going to let the story go on for itself. I'll introduce Jessica. You will see her, and you will see Boris and Natasha and all the people involved in that remarkable event very early on in 1978. You can roll the tape.
Judy cultivated connections with our congressmen and senators, particularly Robert Drinan, Barney Frank, and Ted Kennedy. If a refusenik was imprisoned, she asked their offices to request information on their condition, to press for ameliorating their stay in the Gulag, or to release them altogether and let them leave for Israel. Judy arranged to deliver non-toxic milk to Jessica Katz, a baby who needed milk unavailable in the Soviet Union. And she convinced Ted Kennedy to press the Soviets to allow Jessica to emigrate so she could thrive.
The story that I want to tell you is about how I became a free man, and how, with the help of Action for Soviet Jewry, and especially Judy Patkin, we were finally able to come to America. 45 years ago, my wife and I made the most important decision of our lives. We decided to leave the country. We did not want our future children to grow in a place where there was no freedom, no respect for truth, and where people were afraid to say what they believe in. We applied for an exit visa, but our request was denied, and thus we became refuseniks. 2 years later, our daughter Jessica was born. She was a healthy baby, but a couple of months after birth, she stopped gaining weight. She couldn't digest any milk products, and her body wasn't getting nutrients from food. She was getting weaker by the day and was taken to a Moscow hospital. But her condition continued to deteriorate, and the doctors there did not know what to do. We realized that our only chance to save Jessica's life was to get medical help from the West. My mother spent all her waking hours trying to publicize our plight. One day she called Action for Soviet Jewry. Judy Patkin picked up the phone, and the rest is history.
We heard about Boris and his family through his mother, Claudia, who was living in Cambridge. And she called our office at one point and told us that Boris and Natasha were living in Moscow, and they had a new baby, and the baby wasn't thriving. They were going from crisis to crisis.
Judy contacted a pediatrician in Lexington, Dr. Pallant. He analyzed long distance, our daughter's symptoms, and suggested that we try a special baby formula, progesterone. What happens next was the closest I have ever come to a miracle. In a day or two, Jessica's condition completely transformed, and she started to improve. She began gaining weight rapidly, and in about 2 weeks, she was discharged from the hospital. Judy sprang into action. Action for Soviet Jewry contacted hundreds of Americans and offered them progesterone to bring to Moscow. They built a bridge of life from Boston to Moscow.
And can after can of it went in, and Bailey and I finally brought some in.
I still remember the day when Judy Patkin and Bailey Barron appeared in our Moscow apartment with 17 cans of the formula.
Senator Kennedy was very interested in health issues, did a lot of visiting within the Soviet Union on health matters. And he was able to put together a list of people to bring out with health concerns. And the Katz family made that list.
I received a phone call from fellow refuseniks, Professor Alexander Lerner. He told me that Senator Edward Kennedy will visit him later that night, and that Kennedy wanted to meet with me as well. When my turn came to be introduced, the senator suddenly said, "I need to speak with you privately." We went to the kitchen where Kennedy told me that he just met in Kremlin the Soviet leaders and asked them to grant us visas to leave the country for medical reasons, and that they agreed to do so. On November 10th, 1978, our family arrived in Boston. We were finally free. Here is this can. We still have one can of progesterone. So that was the last can which we did not open. So Jessica, in case you have never seen a can of progesterone, here it is. And now I would like to introduce Jessica Katz to you.
Thank you so much, Daddy, for that introduction and that beautiful story. I'm sure it's not an easy one to tell. It's certainly not an easy one to hear. I don't remember any of those stories. I was 1 year old when I came to this country. People would come up to me and be sort of amazed that I was there and I was sort of a living, breathing human that they had just written postcards about or heard about or attended meetings at their synagogue about. I'm really the living, breathing embodiment of the power of all of your work and all of your activism, right? Baby Jessica's 43 years old now. You know, Judy's work and the work of so many of you here today kind of gave me the life that I have. And so all the postcards that you sent, all the meetings that you attended, all the packages that you helped wrap up have led to me leading a, you know, I hope a life of service, but also just a fairly normal life here in the States. I'm here in New York. I have 2 little kids with this happy family, and none of that would have been possible without the work that Judy and so many of you would have done. So I'm so happy to be here with you today and celebrate the work of Judy and of Action. And I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work. And if it ever seems, as it often does, that some of these, you know, some of these tasks are thankless or that they don't have, you know, a happy ending, I'm just here to tell you that that's not true. So keep at it. Thank you.
Wow, great story, of course, and we're so pleased to see Jessica grown up, and more importantly, that this became really a beginning of a feeling that we had some sense of how to work the system a bit better than we had before, and to get the people involved that needed to do it. Now, those of you who have been to the Soviet Union with Action or otherwise know that it's a country that people do nothing but spy on each other. So they're spying on you, and there's somebody spying on the spy. It keeps employment going. So everybody's supposed to get on top of each other. So when I went to Russia in 1985 with Rabbi Larry Kushner, it became very clear that we had to create a code. And we had this little piece of paper that we're told to memorize with numbers and this and that. And we were supposed to flush it down before in Switzerland, where we changed planes, flush it down so we wouldn't have it. And I, of course, in my innocence, just put it in my pocket and forgot to swallow it because it was a lot to swallow. It was a big piece of paper. So then we get to our hotel in Moscow, and I'm going through my stuff. And said, oh, here's the list. They said, thank God you have it because we have forgotten everything that we were supposed to keep in our heads. And we have to be very careful of what you say in Russia. And we'll be hearing from Hank Isnetsky a little bit about that in a moment. But you had to have codes, you know. So when you're in the hotel room, you should say certain things that mean other things, or we turned on the music, or we danced, or we sang songs, etc. We did whatever we could to sort of create the idea that there could be some sense of quote unquote privacy between the both of us. And this, of course, extended to what went on when we met refuseniks. And often we would walk in the streets and not meet in their apartments in order to make sure we could sort of have really deep conversations. And there were many deep conversations. So I'd like to introduce Hank Isnetsky and his story, which is a great story. So please, run the tape.
Good evening. I'm Hank Isnetsky. I'm founder and director of the Klezmer Conservatory Band and co-chair of Contemporary Improvisation at New England Conservatory. And in 1985, I got a call from Judy Patkin asking if I could organize 4 musicians from my band to visit the Soviet Union and go to 5 different cities, particularly to bring in music and play with musicians there. We were supposed to go to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Riga, Yerevan, and Tbilisi. And when we got there, it seemed like the Soviets were particularly concerned about our trip. And in fact, they threw us out after we had visited only 3 cities, Moscow, Tbilisi, and Yerevan. Probably the most eventful part of our trip was our house concert, where we played with a group of Jewish, Georgian, and Armenian dissonant musicians calling themselves the Phantom Orchestra. Judy had sent us a recording of the group, which was narrated by a 12-year-old, the youngest member of the group, Avi Goldstein, who had established a pen pal and bar mitzvah twin relationship with a 12-year-old from Philadelphia named Josh Shapiro, now better known as Pennsylvania's wonderfully defiant state attorney general. In honor of the Phantom Orchestra, we decided to call our group Phantom West. Now, in retrospect, I'm guessing that our trip was interrupted because of our association on that trip with another more high-profile member of the Phantom Orchestra, Zviad Gamsakordia, a controversial figure who had been a major dissident leader since 1955 and who went on in 1991 to become the first democratically elected president of the Republic of Georgia. Today's reunion of Phantom West is our way of thanking Judy not only for sending us on that life-changing mission, but especially for knowing who to call at the State Department to make sure that we got out of there relatively unscathed. And now, Phantom West with our own version of Those Were the Days in honor of Judy Patkin.
'Twas 85 when Hankus got a phone call from Judy with a very strange idea. We want to send musicians off to Moscow and to 4 other places, God knows where. Who would be the ones to make the journey with instruments to carry on a plane? A mando sax guitar and an accordion. Rosalie, Jeff, and Merrill will be game. Those were the days, my friends. We thought they'd never end. We made new friends and ran from KGB. They caught up with us and sent us home again as we demanded, let our friends be free. And so we left for Sheremetyevo Airport with contact info, medicine, and song. Delayed for 7 hours when we got there, but determined as we were, what could go wrong? In Moscow, we were on our best behavior. We tourists at the symphony and zoo. Played it safe so we could get to Georgia to eat good food and play some music too. Those were the days, my friends. We thought they'd never end. We made new friends and ran from KGB. But they caught up with us and sent us home again as we demanded, let our friends be free. The Goldscenes and Godava seemed like family. Phantom musicians welcomed the new band. Though the KGB gave us a serious warning, soon enough we left for Yerevan. The bravery we saw can't be imagined. We learned so much in only 14 days. Arriving home, reporters came to greet us as we told our story while still in a haze. Those were the days, my friends. We thought they'd never end. We made good friends and ran from KGB. But they caught up with us and sent us home again as we demanded, let our friends be free. And here we gather 35 years later to celebrate the brains behind it all. As boobies and Grateful Zadie sing her praises, let's drink a toast to Judy, one and all. These are the days, our friends, we hope they never end. We sing and dance forever and today. These are the lives we choose, we fight and never lose. These are the days, oh yes, these are the days. These are the days, oh yes, these are the days.
back again. By the way, Hankus in passing mentioned the B'nai Mitzvah twinning program. That was phenomenal. That really brought it directly into congregations in a very personal way. Just a few words before we see the talk about the beginning of Action for Post-Soviet Jewry. Just a little anecdote. In that period when Action for Post-Soviet Jewry began, we had an openness and ability to travel much more. And my daughter, Risa, who was in the beginning of high school, joined the program that the BJE, the Boston Bureau of Education, started of sending kids to our sister city, Dnepropetrovsk. And I must say, it changed her life. And she became a global Jewish citizen. And I think that's what everyone who got involved in the Soviet Jewry movement started to feel, that there is this deep, deep connection between all Jews, and all of us have responsibility for each other. She was warmly received by the community there. It was in the middle of winter, and it became a life-changing experience. She wrote her college essay on it, and it made her a person who sees her role of being a person of service to the community. We're going to now look at the process that brought about the Action for Post-Soviet Jewry. Let's see that tape.
What people don't know now is that even in 1988, we had no idea there was going to be a 1989. We had no idea. And so everybody was operating with the same urgency right up until things really changed. And then, of course, the work goes on, and it goes on today.
Other than Betsy Goodwitz and possibly additional individual travelers who came before us, Action was the first Jewish humanitarian agency after the collapse of the Soviet Union to set foot in Dnieper. I met Judy for the first time on October 5th, 1993 at Logan Airport, Boston, en route to Dnepropetrovsk. And so the four of us set out carrying letters in hand from Senator Edward Kennedy, Congressman Barney Frank, and Barry Schrage, the president of Combined Jewish Philanthropy, addressed to whom it may concern, asking to provide us with any assistance and safety that we may require. We're off on a historic trip, chartering unfamiliar territory, which turned out to be the beginning of a voyage that continues to this very day, providing humanitarian aid in the form of food, clothing, medicine, medical assistance, financial aid, warm houses, training volunteers, and so much more.
To Dnepropetrovsk came 4 women with 8, maybe 10 big, huge suitcases. I was very curious what could be this in these suitcases, because it was not business trip. But I recognized that in suitcases there was medicine.
It was during this first trip that we met Rabbi Kamenetsky. Throughout the span of 25 days that we were there, we gathered frequently with the rabbi and other local upcoming leaders and activists, discussing the needs and aspirations of the Jewish community, which was in its infancy at the time. There was so much excitement and hope in an effort to revive the Jewish community. And I recall Judy being focused, spending her days listening attentively, taking meticulous notes, and planting the seeds already then, setting in motion programs that would most impact and benefit the elderly, the sick, the vulnerable, the needy, the lonely, and those who were forgotten after they lost their families and all else as a result of World War II.
Shalom, I am Shmuel Kamenetsky. I live in Ukraine since 1990, and I'm very privileged to know Judy Patkin. As you know, Ukraine has many Jewish people, and many of them are Jews in need. In Ukraine, you have people who worked all their lives, and all they make is $50, $60, $70 a month. Like, no way people can make a living and support themselves, even basic needs. So this is where Judy always came into the picture, providing very, very important medicine to people, medicine that these people can't live without. But she was the one sending boxes and boxes, and this is just one example, always going to the small shtetl and the villages is even worse than in the big city. Judy, even though I'm a Hasid, a Chabad rabbi, and Judy is a Reformed Jew, but I think she's a very righteous person. Her personality is like a holy, righteous person. The way she talks, the way she walks, the way she looks. She has this look of a holy, righteous person. And here we can say that Judy has hundreds of children, taking care of their needs. Now, when she realized that the medicine is not enough, people are bored, she arranged it's called Tople Dom, the warm home, where on Fridays they get together for the Shabbat, they get a meal, they do Kiddush, they get together. So, because when you go around in the little villages and you meet the people and you get to know them, you really find out what they need. You need to look them in the eyes. And in some places, it's getting them the wood to warm up the house. This is, I mean, I can continue talking about Judy for 3 hours because I admire her so much. I want to wish you, Judy, health, long and happy years, because everything you give to the people, I'm sure God is going to show you his bracha, his blessing. And I wish you had more money, the organization, because, you know, there is always more to do and the people need more and more help. More people here in Ukraine need help today than before. I love to talk about Judy, you know, because if you think how many times she came here in the harsh winters, going to the small shtetl, you know, whatever we say is not enough. You know, this was real sacrifice of herself, not to send the money and the medicine, to come and see the people, meet the people, feel the people. And then you can really know. And for them, the fact that an American, in some of these places, the only American or the only foreigner that visited these places is Judy Patkin. But, you know, to have Judy on my Shabbos table was always a pleasure. My guests were always very impressed with who she is, what she represents. No makeup ever. I tell I have many daughters and a wife, and I tell them, look at Judy, she's a beauty without the makeup. You don't need any makeup on the face. Like she didn't need to make a show off to do, you know what I mean? You know, Judy, no show off, no having to give a show to anybody, just be who she is, real emet, we say it in Hebrew, emet, like the real Judy.
Wow, thank you so much, all of you, especially Rabbi Kamenetsky. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a number of times, and he really is a remarkable person who has done a great deal and appreciates so much of how much we do. There's more to do, as he said, and the future of post-Soviet Jewry is still important, and I'm hoping that we can get that inspiration, if you will, from hearing these comments.
Hi, I'm Mark Baker, President and CEO of Combined Jewish Philanthropies. And it's an honor to celebrate the legacy of Judy Patkin, a true visionary in caring for the vulnerable in the former Soviet Union. You know, at CJP, we talk a lot about the concept of global Jewish citizenship. And we ask ourselves, what does that term mean? It feels so pressing today as millions of Jews around the world are living in some of the areas hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic. What does global Jewish citizenship mean, and how do you live it out? Well, we don't need to look far, and we have our role model in Judy Patkin. For 5 decades, Judy has been the epitome of a global Jewish citizen. Judy was taking action for Jews in the Soviet Union in the beginning of the early 1970s. She was not only spreading awareness about the plight of refuseniks, she was organizing support for them. This led to the founding of Action for Soviet Jewry, now of course for post-Soviet Jewry. And that name changed in part because of world events, but the mission has not, caring for those who need help wherever they are in the world. And Jews in the former Soviet Union still need our help. So Judy has not stopped making a difference. Judy has worked side by side all of my colleagues at CJP for decades. She was in the very first Boston delegation that traveled to our sister city of Dnipro, Ukraine. From the very founding of the Dnipro Kihila project, she worked closely with CJP to address the needs of that city's Jewish community. Today, PSJ and CJP continue to support Jews in Dnipro's Jewish and surrounding towns. Judy's efforts include the Adopt a Bubby and Warm Houses programs. These have provided social connection, clothing, food, and medicine to elderly Jews. And more recently, the combined efforts of CJP and PSJ has led to the Boston area's response to the COVID-19 in the former Soviet Union. Judy's commitment and her care for Jews around the world have made an incredibly positive impact on tens of thousands of people. For nearly a half a century, Judy, you have inspired us to do more, to give more, to care more about the Jews seeking to leave the former Soviet Union and those who have remained. On behalf of the Greater Boston Jewish community and CJP, thank you, Judy, for your leadership, for your tireless advocacy on behalf of Jews around the world, and for being a model of what it means to be a global Jewish citizen. Mazel tov.
It's a big pleasure, big honor to meet Judy in our life and to go on the life together with her for more than 25 years. So I can say we celebrated silver jubilee of our partnership, of our friendship, and of our common work to help to other people. She gave me at the airport the floppy disk. This is for you. And I asked it, what is this? That is full report of my visit. So she, after the long day, she is also write all details, and she is afraid not forget, not lost any details, because it's connect not to her person, it's connect to people who we visited and who Judy helped, and it's in each her visit. She's quiet, she's nice in person, but she's very strong lady, and the person who is not afraid from no one. So she always have strong mission and strong wishes to go ahead to help people.
Я Татьяна Сидельковская, координатор программы Action for Post-Soviet Jewry. Я хочу немного рассказать об удивительном человеке, моем руководителе и большом друге Judy Patkin. Да, действительно, об этом человеке можно говорить часами. Это человек, который сам мало говорит, но очень много делает. Каждый год на протяжении 25 лет Judy приезжала в Днепропетровск, чтобы иметь возможность встретиться и посетить на дому наших подопечных, которые разбросаны были по всей Украине. Она проезжала тысячи и тысячи километров по нашим украинским дорогам, чтобы их увидеть и с ними поговорить. Ее память и обязательность могла удивить любого. Посещая во время визита десятки клиентов на дому, она всегда помнила и выполняла все обещанное им. Судьба и проблемы клиентов становились частью ее жизни. И не было ни одного случая, чтобы проблема не была решена или о ней забыли. Она возвращалась к каждому случаю, пока он не был решен. Для тысячи наших клиентов было сильной мотивацией и большое желание увидеть Judy лично и выразить ей свою благодарность. Для многих одиноких людей наша Judy стала Аидышем мама. Благодаря Judy они чувствовали себя, что у них есть родной человек, что они не одиноки в этом мире, который заботится о них. Judy получала тысячи благословений от всех наших подопечных. Во многих случаях она даже делала больше, чем обещала. И это был хороший пример для меня и для моих координаторов в нашей общей работе. Я очень благословенна, что я имела возможность работать на протяжении 25 лет с таким человеком, человеком большой души и сердца. А самое главное, что это родной человек есть в моей жизни.
One of her many projects was to start an eye clinic. She shipped thousands of donated and used eyeglasses only to be refurbished and reused again. I was on one of those trips and personally witnessed hundreds of people lined up for hours to have eye examinations. After they were tested, they were matched with glasses based on their eye prescription. For many, it was a life-changing experience to be able to see clearly for the first time. It's hard to put in perspective how many lives you've impacted and saved, not just by offering help, but by giving hope where there was none. People often wondered why someone thousands of miles away would care so much and go out on a limb to make a difference. Well, I can only say that you are in a league of your own. You are very special and there's no one quite like you. You have been a role model to me, and being part of Action has been personal. I was born in Ukraine and was lucky enough to come to this country at a young age. Being part of Action enabled me to give back in a small way. However, there's much more work to be done, and going forward, I hope that your rich legacy will inspire young people and future generations who can learn and emulate the steps you took and the sacrifices you've made. May you be blessed and live a long life filled with health, joy, and have a leisurely and happy retirement. L'chaim.
Indeed, l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim tovim u'l'shalom. We should have a good life and a life of tranquility. When you talk about the Bubby and Zadie program and you talk about all these wonderful people, as my father, who was also from the Ukraine and was in the Red Army and later on survived in the Soviet Union, he had the luck of being a Polish national before the war, was able to be able to leave. And I often think about the fact that all of these Soviet Jews were really part of the larger community that I would have been in, and feeling very personal about our encounters. And you look around a room of Russian Jews, you say, they look like Jews I know. They look like relatives. And indeed, they are relatives. Over the years, many, many people have been impacted, of course, by Judy's work. But there were very special people that also would love to express their thanks to her, because over the years, as I say, she fostered relationships with people in all avenues to help this project become successful. So I'd like to present these special speakers to you right now.
Judy Patkin was always there, along with Bailey Barron. I also remember Judy traveling to Ukraine, to Belarus, and elsewhere, looking after Action's various projects there, looking after the Jewish population in general. And after I returned to Chicago, I marveled at how much easier it was to run into Judy in Ukraine.
I remember Judy very happily. I was pleased to be able to be an advocate on behalf of Soviet Jewry, but it simply wouldn't have been possible without Action for Soviet Jewry and particularly her.
Dear Judy, I can't believe you're retiring from the active involved in struggle for Soviet Jewry only now. We retired 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago. We feel that that is the war which we already have won. And you, who is one of the very first veterans, I remember you in the Boston Action for Soviet Jewry. And you, one of those who initiated all these national campaigns of twinning bar mitzvahs and adopting the families. And visiting and demonstrating and signing letters. And then after the Soviet Union fell, to make sure that none of those elderly Soviet Jews are not abandoned. You did so much and you continued working for all these years. Dear Judy, thank you for your unique contribution to our great struggle, our great victory, and for the continued journey together of our one Jewish family.
I first met Judy in the fall of 2000. I was helping my cousins who lived in St. Petersburg, Russia. They had applied for refugee status to the United States under the Lautenberg Amendment. They had just received notice that they had been granted an interview in Moscow. In my queries for help, I had been told that Judy Patkin was the person to talk to about the interview process. I called Judy and she told me to come by the office. When I arrived, she handed me a 2-page list of possible questions. With that list, I was able to help my cousins prepare. Their interview was a success and they received refugee and parolee status. As a family of 6 spanning 4 generations, they emigrated to the United States in the summer of 2001. Judy's help was invaluable in securing their visa status. A year or so later, I joined the Board of Action for Post-Soviet Jewry as vice president, and then the following year became the president of the board. My first trip with Judy was in October 2003. 4 of us traveled to Ukraine and Belarus to visit our community coordinators and clients. It was the first of 9 or 10 trips I made with Judy. We met many elderly and occasionally young, needy Jews. Sometimes their stories were uplifting, other times sad and depressing, but always the visits and Judy's personal attention lifted spirits. We heard stories of survival during World War II and visited innumerable war memorials and broadened our understanding of the deprivation and loss in the war years. Our travels included long road trips over unbelievably poor roads in Ukraine, several van breakdowns on the highway, on one occasion an unheated hotel room in freezing temperatures, an overnight train trip from Kiev to Dnipro in a crowded sleeper car with no lower bunks available, and a few side trips to cities of our ancestors. What we saw firsthand, the revival of Jewish life where none had really existed during the Soviet years. Our adventures were many and fascinating. It has been such a pleasure to work with and travel with Judy. It is now my honor to have Judy become an emeritus member of Action for Post-Soviet Jewry.
I have had the honor of working alongside Judy for about 1.5 years now. In most organizations, an elongated leadership transition is not standard practice. Yet, as you have continuously heard, Judy Patkin is anything but traditional, and making sure the work of action that each elderly and isolated individual APSJ cares for will continue to be supported reflects Judy's deep and lifelong 45+ year commitment to this work. I am beyond grateful to Judy for all that she does and all that she has taught me. There are 2 Pekera or teachings from our sages texts that to me really reflect Judy's unique leadership style. Pekera 2.5, in a place where there are no leaders, strive to be a leader. Pekera 1.15, say little and do much. I have learned that this is an organization that since the beginning has stayed rooted to its heart center, while at the same time is nimble and progressive enough to pivot to meet emerging and emergency needs. And Judy, leading the way, stepped in to provide programs and services where there were none, and yet there was a great need, a leader where there was none. By asking good questions, listening deeply, and practicing brevity, Judy understood what was needed and created programs like the Adopt a Bubby Zadie and Warm House. Judy may say little, yet she does a lot. I'm filled with gratitude to Judy and the community of APSJ supporters she has built, especially to everyone who has been on the Action for Soviet and post-Soviet journey with her. And in these thoughts, I include all those on the Zoom today those who wanted to be with us today but could not, and those who were so important to the work of action and are no longer with us, who are now living in our hearts and memories. Every time I walk into the Crescent Street office and go through the files and pictures, every submitted personal tribute to Judy I've read and listened to, and all the individual conversations I have had and stories I have heard about Judy and the work of action, I become more in awe of Judy and the organization she helped build. I am beyond grateful for the opportunity to continue this work. As we move through this global pandemic and the political changes happening in Eastern Europe, we can continue the work of action to meet emerging and emergency needs. There is more work to be done. Coming together as global Jewish citizens, we can continue to develop and provide innovative services to impoverished and vulnerable elderly and isolated Jews in Eastern Europe. I look forward to working with the APSJ board and all of you to create internship opportunities for teens and young adults, educational resources about the Jewish history of Eastern Europe, with a special emphasis on the Refusnik era, and telemed services for our adopted Bubby and Zadie's. Thank you, Judy, for all you do and continue to do. Thank you for your support and guidance. And I am grateful you continue to be on the other end of the phone or email as needed. Kol hakavod.
Kol hakavod, indeed. Just two things I want to, when I was on the Jewish Community Relations Council, I got involved when the CJP and Boston community created the sister city. There were two very important things that were not mentioned yet. One was the creation of a women's health clinic for the entire community in Dnieper-Petrovsk. And second, I recall, and have to forgive me for not remembering the names of the doctors who went and created the possibility for people with hip injuries. You may remember that. To get through it, where in the old days, if you were elderly and had a hip injury, it meant pretty much the end. And we did quite a bit in that level as well. Well, I wanted to introduce now, of course, the support system for Judy, and that's the family. And I see a lot of Patkins and Kents all over in different locations here. I had the pleasure of knowing Helen and George Kent, Judy's parents, and you could see where she got her genteelness from. They were very genteel, especially Helen, who was terrific. And we'd like now to introduce the family that surrounds Judy. And I think you will be wonderfully, wonderfully, if you will, warmed in your hearts to see them all. Let's run that tape.
My great-great-grandfathers, her grandfathers, both emigrated from Belarus, from small shtetl towns on the opposite sides of Belarus, Bobrusk and Baranovichi. Both her maternal and paternal grandfathers were tailors. I have always known my mother was special, and on this trip I got to see her in action, pun intended, on the ground in Ukraine, working on behalf of the people that she had devoted her life to. And seeing what she built in terms of the Adopted Bobby and Zadie aid network was really amazing. So the amount of time and effort and sort of knocking on one door at a time and relationship building involved in building this network in a country where there is not a lot of trust. And where you need to have people that people know, people who are insiders, people like Jan and Tanya, who are, were Judy's people on the ground. What they did is really amazing in a fairly short amount of time, and they've built it and sustained it. And it's really person to person, both finding the coordinators and training them, which is something they've done more and more of over the years, bringing them together to one city so they can all meet each other and feel connected and share stories and learn new skills and new ways of doing things together. Now that you're retiring, I hope to spend more time with you, enjoying your company, which I always do, and cherishing you. Happy 85th birthday, Mom.
I was
privileged enough to accompany her on a couple trips to the Ukraine, and they were fascinating. We went in 2012 and 2013 together, and then I went back again in 2019, more recently with my son as well. It's just incredible. What's so interesting is not just the fascinating travel that we did together, but also learning about all the people who she helps. When I think about her and all the lives that she's touched, a person who comes to mind is Mother Teresa. She can never do too much. She can never go too far. She just keeps giving and giving and giving. And the needier, the more she wants to give. She also is the type of person who doesn't have barriers. So she moves forward at her pace and gets the job done, regardless of what people tell her can and can't be done. And she finds ways to reach people no matter how far. And the people who we help when we go on these trips, they are so kind, so compassionate, and so welcoming. It's so great to see my mother in this community helping people and seeing the love that's given back and forth two ways. And one of the tasks that she's assigned to herself was to document their experiences and to make a complete history of what they went through, sometimes going all the way back to pre-World War II, other times talking about more recent experiences, like what's been happening with some of the people who have fled some of the war-torn areas. It's just a wonderful experience to go there, and the amount of good that my mom, Judy Patkin, has been able to deliver is incredible. Just a single individual. One story I'll tell you is when she started a program where she offered eyeglasses to people who needed them but didn't have the means to buy their own. And the gentleman came in, tried on a pair of glasses, sat down and started reading the newspaper nonstop for an hour or two. He probably hadn't been able to read for years. We don't know how long. All of a sudden he had this opportunity to get information and news in a way which he wasn't able to before. And it was just so heartwarming to see that she was able to provide such a wonderful service.
I'd always known that my grandmother did a lot of charity, and that she, basically dedicated her life to this cause. Since I was young, I would help her when she came to the house. We'd have clothing from a clothing drive. We'd help load up her car with it, bags and bags and bags, several times a year. But I think going to Ukraine and seeing the work that she does and seeing the people that she was helping and the circumstances they were in really solidified for me just how much of an angel she is. I'm like a fit young man in my early 20s. I arrived in Ukraine on a plane. Me and my mom got there, basically followed my grandmother around, seeing everything she does. I was exhausted, I'm like fit, young, and she's like in her 80s, and she is tireless. She is nonstop. She was constantly at cause. And throughout that entire trip, I was there for about a week. By the end of it, I was completely depleted, and she had been doing it for like a month, for a month total. So, in her 80s, and I think that just gives a little bit of perspective to the effort and the drive and the dedication she has to that cause.
I did my bat mitzvah project with Action, and my grandma would help me to pack the bags and to get everything sent to the Ukraine and the other countries. And she taught me how important it is to give back to those in need, and how important it is to do your best to help people, even if they're a country and an ocean away.
I also did my bat mitzvah project with Action, and my grandma helped me contact a pen pal in the Ukraine, where I got to write back and forth with a girl living in the Ukraine that was my age. And I got to learn a lot about her culture, and I got to share pieces of mine. And it taught me how valuable it is to connect with and be able to relate to the people you're helping.
Wow, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Now I'd like to just thank you, Judy, for involving me in this. I want to thank you for making it to 85. I want to thank you for giving us something to celebrate in these very difficult times that all of us are going through. because we need more simchas. We need more things to celebrate and to appreciate all that you've done. You are a true visionary. And we talked about, as your daughter said, about people getting glasses for the first time. You helped many people here see things that they didn't see before. And a good leader, as you have been, creates more leaders. And that's the real test of someone who is a visionary. So again, I thank you. I thank all of you people for helping participate. And there's more to come, don't worry. And I'd like to introduce Judy Patkin.
Well, it's been an amazing journey. And I started really in 1970 with the Leningrad trials. And I was 40 years old then. And in a few days, I'll be celebrating my 85th birthday. So it's been a long time living with all of this. And I had a lot to learn at the beginning. I had to follow other people, learn from them, figure out what was going on in the Soviet Union. Read a lot, listened a lot, and slowly but surely I began to figure out what it was that I could possibly do to help. And there are so many amazing people I met on the way. That's really been the pleasure of it. The early days was co-chair with Bailey Barron, and Sheila Galland was at the office, and both of them are no longer here. Both have passed away. And I had Galina Zilberstein and Zaya Krasko in the office, and they were a huge help. It was good. Marina Javits came as a translator. Galina Zilberstein translated a lot on trips, and I really needed a translator because I wasn't fluent at all in Russian, and I needed someone to tell me what was really going on when we visited. And I can still remember Jan Sidelkovsky saying to me one day, we really could help people outside of Dnepropetrovsk. We could go to some of the smaller cities that were close by, and it would be easy to set up a program there to help them. And I thought, oh, how's a small nonprofit with very few resources supposed to do all this? But I figured the need was there. So we would at least start it and see what would happen. And surprisingly, the resources came along.
Это совсем противоположная сторона. Бердянск, Мелитополь.
We work with pensioners, and we have coordinators in each city that we go to. And here is our coordinator for.
И мы работаем.
Because of Jan and Tanya Sidelkovsky, we had amazing people to work with. Coordinators who worked with finding people in their communities were wonderful. They did a great job, and they're still doing a wonderful job. And we expanded between a couple of communities close to Dnepropetrovsk to over a dozen now, up and down Ukraine, mostly in the east, but we're also helping other places, some in Belarus, some in the Western Ukraine. Doesn't stop. Even a hospital in Tarusa, Russia, from time to time, we've been helping. To hear all the stories, to have people let us into their homes, which you don't take for granted. You know, it was a privilege to do all of this. Listen to their lives, listen to what happened during the Holocaust for people who survived it. Met people who were partisans as children fighting in the forest. And we even met a couple of women who lived to be over 100 years old, who showed us the letters they got from the president to Ukraine, congratulating them. With whatever we have in resources, we still try to get it over there and to get the aid out. And our coordinators became friends with these people. And we set up a warm house movement where people could gather in an apartment. And Tanya Sidelkovskaya was able to find a hostess for this, which is an easy thing to do. Usually people who love to cook, but just couldn't afford to have guests at their house. So we would provide the funds, and they would get together with friends, and they would shop and they would cook. And you had maybe a dozen people come to their apartment, maybe once a month, sometimes only on the major Jewish holidays. And in many of these communities, it was the only Jewish event that took place for these people, and they became a close-knit group. And it went on year after year. And we get demands from people, you know, who want to do more of this. And it's always been a pleasure. And it's been fun for me to look back on all of this, to take stock of things. It's a good time in my life to do that. And as I say, it's been a privilege to do this work, to meet so many people and get to know them here in the US as well as overseas. And I'm blessed, as I said to Jan, to have lived through such a time as this and to partake in some of Jewish history, which is still being written as we go on today. And it's good to see the work we've done, to take part in it, and it's good to see the work continue on with new people coming in. Because I believe Am Yisrael High, the people of Israel live on. Thank you.
Who would have predicted when we started Action for Soviet Jewry that Action would be a platform for a life of human rights and human caring? With awe and love and deep appreciation, the Board of Action is binding the volumes of all your trip reports to Ukraine and Belarus from 1993 to 2019. We're presenting these volumes to you as a recorded memory of your work and as an inspiration for future generations. Now, please enjoy the final video of tributes, toasts, and love.
The keeper of the flame, the person who goes to bed at night with it and wakes up with it every morning. And I have to say that for me, that was Judy Patkin.
It's also the case she was a pleasure to deal with. Sometimes people who have a great passion for humanity can be difficult personally. This is a very emotional subject that we were dealing with, and she was consistently a source of not just information, but generally good advice.
She was poised, she had class. And now I'll say something I can say about very few people, especially in the Jewish community. I never heard anyone say a bad word about Judy Patkin in 45 years, not a single word. So therefore, I would like to propose 2 toasts for Judy. I raise my glass and I say, Judy, l'chaim, may the Almighty grant you good health and well-being until the age of 120, ad mei v'esrim. And my second toast, and you can see Russian rocket fuel with the word Svoboda, freedom, written on my shot glass, za vaše zdarovie.
There is a lot we can talk about. She's very special, you know, very special person. I'm embarrassed that I'm such an admirer of Judy, you know, it's like embarrassing.
Judy was, Judy is, and Judy will be a mensch. We love you. It was big honor to work with you, and thank you for all you did for us in person, for my wife, for my family, because we have not bored between work and our friendship and love. Thank you, Judy, for everything.
Я хочу поздравить Джуди с ее прекрасным юбилеем. До 120, как до 20. Мазл тов, мазл тов, мазл тов.
Judy, you are a real mensch. Humble, dedicated, brilliant, and one of the hardest working individuals I've ever met. The compassion and empathy you feel and exhibit has no boundaries. I salute you for all that you've accomplished. She inspired me. You know, I always refer to her as Mother Teresa. I mean, people can't even begin to comprehend what she has done. And she literally impacted thousands of lives. And I've seen it for all these 27 years. and she's been very meaningful.
I sent stuff too, and I know the difficulty involved in sending materials over there, being sure that they would get past border controls and get to the people for whom they were intended. I was always admiring of anyone who could pull this off, and Judy pulled it off brilliantly. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk about Judy. It's always so wonderful.
So Judy, Mom, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for living such a rich, interesting, and inspiring life, and for saving me a front row seat. I want to thank you for doing the right thing and teaching by example. I want to thank you for taking such good care of everyone. The Bubbies and Zadies, your own parents, your brother.
I want to just thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about her. She's an incredible person who has done incredible things and is continuing to give back to the community in new ways, never stops. Mom, you're a wonderful person. Thank you for teaching me how to give to charity and to be a good citizen.
Congratulations, Grandma. You've done so much at Action and we're so proud of you. We love you.
It's wonderful to see all these people and hear from them. It's just amazing. I hope we get beyond this COVID-19 so I can actually see people in person. It's wonderful that we have Zoom to bring so many people together, but I miss really seeing people in person too. And thank you so much for all the people who put this together, all the good feelings. I have such warm feelings for all of the people that I've met over the years. And that's really what has made the work worthwhile. Amazing people here, amazing people on my board here, amazing people in Ukraine and Belarus, Russia. There were good people everywhere in this world, and it's been really a privilege to be able to work with all of you. Thank you so much for all the good words. I really treasure them. And I'd like to turn this over to Debbie Carden, who is the future for Action for Post-Soviet Jewry. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Judy. There's just no way of thanking you. Words just don't seem enough for all the lives you touched, influenced, and saved in the community of ASJ and APSJ. There is a tribute book, and we couldn't fit everything into this amount of time. And so there is a beautiful tribute book with lots of more tributes, and we'll have the link in the chat in a minute. And we also have some video tributes, and that will be sent to you on a USB port. We have had over 100 people today that took time to participate in this event in your honor. So thank you to everybody for taking time out of your Sunday to do that. Additionally, there have been over 130 people who donated in Judy's honor. Thank you. Your generosity is what makes the work of APSJ going. And as Rabbi Kamenetsky mentioned, there is always a need, and there will continue to be a need. I do feel very blessed to take on this very sacred work, and with your ongoing support, continue to find new and innovative ways for APSJ to meet emergency and emerging needs. So one final thank you to you, Judy. I couldn't say thank you to everybody that I wanted to say. So just stay tuned. There's going to be like a few slides with everybody's thank yous on them, but don't log off. Don't change the channel, because there's still, if you can stay with us, there's still a little bit more to come after the credits. A very special thank you to Reb Moshe. There's no one else who could have guided us through this 45-year history with such love, humor, and spirituality. Thank you to Ben and Julian of Vimeo, who skillfully and magically produced this amazing event and helped us make it relational, so it wasn't just a webinar. And I want to call out a few very special contributors. Judy, your grandchildren, Jessica Katz, Andy Tarsi, David Barron, and Karen and Ruth Patkin. While you all had different experiences, you all grew up with ASP and ASPJ in your home. It's part of your family, and it was so special to have this next generation helping, sharing, and caring. So with that, we'll run the few quick slides of credits because I don't want to forget anybody.
They call me Anatole, in prison I do lie. My little window looks out on a Russian sky. I've been arrested here for crimes they have not named, but all my people know the charge will be a frame. See my accuser standing in the hall. He points his finger at us all. You now must pay the penalty for the crime of daring to be free. We are leaving Mother Russia. We have waited far too long. We are leaving Mother Russia. When they come for us, we'll be gone. For 15 centuries we've called this land our home.
So one final thank you to everybody on this Zoom today, and a special thank you to Judy. May you enjoy your retirement. May you live to be 120. Mazel tov and kol hakavod. And everybody, if you want to go on now and enjoy your Sunday, please do. But if you want to stay on for a few more minutes, we're gonna ask you to unmute, and we'll schmooze a little bit and kibitz and maybe go out into some breakout rooms so that Judy can go around and chat with you directly. Thank you so much, and thank you, Judy.